All right, we're going to do part 3 of the Gay Turd's book, The Blood of Patriots, How I Took Down an Anti-Government Militia with Beer, Bounty Hunting, and Badassery. Bill Fulton and Jeannie Devon. First, I'm going to start off with 2 paragraphs on page 147 that describe why Bill Fulton is a raging homosexual. Page 147, I think I've covered this before in part 2, but it bears repeating. Brian was a true badass. He was never happier than when he was pulling a trigger or blowing stuff up. Arms and chest covered with tribal tattoos, tall, muscular frame, eyes that could bore holes in wood, and an encyclopedic memory for sound bites from the founding fathers to Ayn Rand, to obscure Austrian economist. He intimidated the crap out of people on several levels, and I loved him for it. We'd been friends for years, underneath some fairly significant delusions and a hard, rough edge. He was a good guy. He was the one you wanted to have your back, and he was no fan of Schaefer Cox. We'll skip down a little bit. Brian, scanned my face trying to read it. All right, man, let's walk. He had on a pair of well-worn car hat pants and work boots and a black dark North Tactical t-shirt. I wore my black Drop Zone t-shirt. We were counterparts and dressed like it. He lit a Marlboro as we stepped out into the thin yellow sunlight, crossed the parking lot toward the road. If that's not the writings of a raging homosexual gay turd about his infatuation with Aaron Bennett, I don't know what is. I'm going to go to page 148. I won't go through the whole book today, but I'll at least do as much as I can before I have to go myself, and we'll pick up with part 4 later. But on page 148, it says, this is about child custody and getting arrested for beating the shit out of his wife. Anybody who's seen the pictures, anybody that knows the details of the story, anybody who knows that they threatened to take Schaefer's kids away, knows that Schaefer did not beat the shit out of his wife. He goes on to write, this is just the Schaefer Cox show. I'm telling you, it's seriously effed up. So he lies about Schaefer beating the crap out of his wife, S-H-I-T. He uses words like that all throughout the book. The book is just full of cuss words every page actually. I'm going to talk now about the conspiracy for Bill Fulton and Aaron Bennett to murder Schaefer Cox. Now, Schaefer put in trial, during the trial, said that there was a conspiracy by Aaron Bennett and Bill Fulton to kill him. And Scrocky told the jury that that was not the case. If you guys remember, Scrocky told the jury that you can look in all the documentation, you can look in all the audio, and you'll never see any evidence of Bill Fulton or Aaron Bennett issuing death threats against Schaefer. And however, I have found the audio, and we've put out videos that explicitly discuss death threats from Bill Fulton and Aaron Bennett. Now, when Bill Fulton writes this book, he openly admits it in the book that him and Aaron Bennett were conspiring to murder Schaefer Cox. And so when you see statements from Schaefer Cox, this case is all about mindset. You need to understand that the statements are in the context of Schaefer knew that Bill Fulton and Aaron Bennett were trying to kill him. Bill Fulton admits it in this book, and I'm going to read you the sections of the book that give that away. Page 149, Bill Fulton is meeting with Aaron Bennett just before the Blondies event. Keep in mind, Pike's Landing is the event before, and then we have the Blondies event. I want to talk about the seriousness that Bill Fulton admits that both of those meetings were recorded. The Pike's Landing event and the Blondies event were recorded by Bill Fulton. And yet Schaefer never got the recording. His defense team never got the recording. So there's two significant aspects that you guys need to keep in mind as I read sections from this book. Bill Fulton is going to admit recording those events, and yet Schaefer and his defense team never got those recordings. And those are key recordings where Schaefer supposedly is talking about violent plans to kill judges and to take over, portions of Alaska with a militia. So if those recordings were so much in favor of the government in showing the violent plans of Schaefer, don't you think the government would want you to hear it? Don't you think they would want the jury to hear it? And yet those recordings have been destroyed. That is a very serious thing. And it's a very serious thing that Scrocky lied to the jury and told the jury that there's no evidence whatsoever. You can look high, you can look low, you can look through all the documentation, you can hear all the audios, and you'll never find anything that shows death threats from Bill Fulton and Aaron Bennett towards Schaefer. All right, let's read this. Page 149 at the top, it says, we need to cut this guy's balls off, and now. We need to do something. That's Bill Fulton talking to Aaron Bennett in his own book. If we go down the page, here's a third paragraph from the bottom. I'm going to tell you something. Brian stopped walking and stood for a moment looking at the ground. He flicked his cigarette butt as it sputtered across the dirt road. He met my gaze. I'm just letting you know because you're my friend if he does do this. If the balloon goes up and the party happens, Schaefer's going to be the one right out in front waving the flag. He's going to start this war. But on day 1 or day 2, after everyone's in, but before it gets too big and fucks it all up, he's going to get taken down. This isn't just me talking either. Mark my words, somebody's going to put a bullet in his head and make it look like the feds did it. No shit. Someone's going to martyr his ass because nobody wants to deal with Schaefer's bullshit. He can start it if he wants, but he's not going to own it. He talks a good game and he sucks people in, but nobody wants a little dictator. Nobody wants a Hitler. You know what I'm saying? I knew exactly what he was saying. Now that's Aaron Bennett in a conversation with Bill Fulton talking about putting a bullet in Schaefer Cox's head. I hope you go read that for yourself, and I hope you rewind and read that paragraph and listen to it again. Let me read you what Aaron Bennett is telling Bill Fulton in Bill Fulton's own book, and they're talking about somebody's going to put a bullet in his head, and Scrocky told the jury that Bill Fulton and Aaron Bennett never issued death threats to Schaefer. Let me read it again, or portions of it. This is Aaron Bennett talking with Bill Fulton just before the Blondies meeting. If the balloon goes up and the party happens, Schaefer's going to be the one right out in front waving the flag. He's going to start this war, but on day 1 or day 2, after everyone's in, but before he gets too big and fucks it all up, he's going to get taken down. This isn't just me talking either. Mark my words, somebody's going to put a bullet in his head and make it look like the feds did it. That's Aaron Bennett talking to Fulton. No shit? That's what Bill Fulton says. Aaron Bennett continues, someone's going to martyr his ass, but nobody wants to deal with Schaefer's bullshit. He can start it if he wants, but he's not going to own it. He talks a good game and he sucks people in, but nobody wants a little dictator. Nobody wants a little Hitler. You know what I'm saying? I knew exactly what he was saying. Now listen to what Bill Fulton says in response to death threats against Schaefer. This is the government informant talking to Aaron Bennett and replying to what he just heard. Hey, you've got my blessing, dude. Go for it. Did you hear what I just said? I don't think you heard it. Let me read it again. You got Bill Fulton writing a book. He's a government informant. He just heard a death threat against Schaefer. Somebody's going to put a bullet in his head. Listen to what the government informant tells Aaron Bennett. Hey, you've got my blessing, dude. Go for it. I couldn't help but laugh to myself at the irony. Here was Schaefer Cox the night before, wide-eyed and scared like a rabbit, telling me that the FBI had some invisible Black Ops hit squad out to get him and his family. But in the real world, the only people who had plans to put a cap in him, the only people who really had plans to put a cap in him were the militias he considered his adoring followers. This is Bill Fulton speaking to Aaron Bennett. I hear you, man. Nobody wants a little Hitler. I raised my styrofoam cup. That's Bill Fulton responding to Aaron Bennett's death threats, and yet Scrocky told the jury that there was never any death threats from Aaron Bennett or Bill Fulton. At the bottom of page 150, Bill Fulton talks about it's all a Hollywood movie. He then goes on to admit that Bill Fulton is on an anti-Christian crusade and that it's personal. On page 154, it's all about Bill Fulton being perceived as a dad. Like I said before, Bill Fulton is like one of these mistreated whores or prostitutes that had daddy issues when they were growing up, and you know, they're just constantly, you know, dealing with daddy issues. And so Bill Fulton thinks of himself as a father for the people that he hires at his Gay Turd drop zone place. On page 155, Bill Fulton flat out admits to recording the Blondies meeting. I'm going to read you the paragraphs, and yet Schaefer's defense team nor Schaefer ever got to hear the Blondies meeting. And you got to ask yourselves, why did Scrocky destroy that exculpatory evidence? Like I said, that one reason alone, that Scrocky destroyed the Pike's Landing audio the day before, and Scrocky destroyed the Blondies meeting the day the day of the Blondies meeting, Scrocky should be in jail. And whoever destroyed the audio from both of those meetings, Pike's Landing and Blondies, should be in jail. Here's page 155, where Bill Fulton admits that he was wearing a wire. I'd left my cell phone with Jesus. Jesus is Bill Fulton's assistant. And I guess he thinks it's funny to mock his assistant or mock Jesus by calling his buddy Jesus. I'd left my cell phone with Jesus on the swing. Brian wanded the militia leaders as they entered. Not for weapons. Guns were fine. He checked for wires to catch anyone secretly working for the feds. I was grateful. I was clean, but glad nobody was monitoring my pulse. Jesus and the rest of the armed security detail waited outside. I'd sold Brian the bug detector wand a while back. It didn't work. None of the bug detectors I sold actually worked. We made sure of it. I didn't need that on my conscience. Anyone who needed a bug detector was up to no good. The little lights came on, and every once in a while a fluorescent bulb would set it off. So people just assumed they were operational. The only working bug detectors in Drop Zone were the ones we used ourselves for security jobs. I passed the sweep with flying colors. Now, he does make the statement, I was grateful I was clean, but then he goes on to talk about how the bug detectors don't work and that he was glad nobody was checking his pulse. So you have to ask yourself, why would they have not recorded the Blondies meeting? Of course they recorded the Blondies meeting. Even Aaron Bennett, in a discussion I had with Aaron Bennett, admitted they recorded the Blondies meeting. He said there were video cameras in the Blondies meeting as well, and yet Schaefer never got to see those. The fact that that evidence from Pike's Landing, and we know the Pike's Landing audio, the FBI had that. We know they had that for over a year. Because there is a recording where they're playing the audio in the background, and we know that it existed. All right. On page 156, I wanted to read you this from Bill Fulton's book. At the very least, we could buy time, but I wanted to utterly destroy him as a player. I'd had enough of this guy. I guess I did have something personal at stake. So Bill Fulton admits in that paragraph that he wanted to utterly destroy Schaefer Cox and that it was personal. When did law enforcement and FBI government informants get to carry out their personal vendettas against their personal enemies operating on behalf of the state. I guess if you're Bill Fulton operating under the direction of Sandra Klein, you get to implement your personal vendettas. All right, the last part of part 3, I want to read you guys the page 157 and part of 158, where Bill Fulton admits to threatening Schaefer Cox and Les Zerbe. But here we go, top of page 157. By the time Cox finally showed up, I was a little drunker than I should have been. For a drunkard, fat retard like Bill Fulton to admit that he's drunk, he must have been really, really, really drunk. First things first. Hey man, before we get started here, do you have something for me? He stared at me. I'm not sure. I lowered my voice and leaned in. You have names, places, right? Who am I supposed to bring in? The plan. Plan? I'm not sure what you mean, Bill. Plan for what? I remembered Cox from the previous night. He was serious, deadly so. This was the Republican convention all over again, just like the plan to overthrow Rudrick. When he was all in and hours later bailed, I stood there, an undercover FBI operative, with potential egg on my face in a room full of annoyed badasses with guns, who'd been waiting for something and at the mercy of an unpredictable militia leader with homicidal tendencies. He's calling Schaefer Cox an unpredictable militia leader with homicidal tendencies. In a fucking tweed cap. I knew it wasn't if Schaefer Cox was going to snap, it was when. And I was caught off guard for the second time with this asshole. But this wasn't some backroom political vote tally. It was life or death stuff. And I just couldn't let it pass. If he wasn't going to talk about the plan, I sure as hell was. This was going to end now. You don't have a plan? What do you mean you don't have a plan? You sure as fuck had a plan last night. I had a loud voice anyway, but I jacked up the volume to make sure it filled the rest of the room, which wasn't hard. Silence fell immediately. You told me to get my men up here and start arresting people. I was on the phone last night setting this up. You can't just tell me it was all bullshit, Schaefer. Zerbe was right there and heard the whole fucking thing. Cox looked around the room, unable to fix on anyone, and it became clear immediately that nobody knew about this plan to start a war with the feds. You know why nobody knew about the plan to start a war with the feds? Because there was no plan. And the 2 audios they supposedly have that proves there was a plan, they'd asked to be destroyed. He was counting on them to back him up, and yet they were completely in the dark. I think you're overreacting a little, Bill. I never said that there was actually a plan. You don't think that arresting judges and hanging them is a plan? You are ready to start a fucking war with the feds and you're expecting the physical support of every asset in this room? You are expecting these guys to put it all on the line for you and you're hiring me to start it? And they don't even fucking know? Are you kidding me? Cox looked terrified and Zerbe rose to his defense. I don't know who in the hell you think you are, son, and coming up here and acting like you own the place with your little assistant out there called Jesus. You say you're on our side and you try to act like one of us, but you know what? I think you're a damn phony. I don't know you. None of us know you. Why don't you just get out of here and go home to Anchorage? That was it, the moment of truth. The alpha male challenge. That sounds like a faggot writing this thing. And it came from Zerbe, not Cox. I wasn't about to lose a round to that asshole either. I scanned the room, situational awareness, Brian at my right, 4 foot deep center, 4 foot deep counter in front of me, Zerbe behind it, knife in my pocket. Are you calling me a liar, old man? My face was hot and I locked eyes like a bull. Yes, I am. Zerbe just stood there, his pudgy face absurdly red against his shock of white hair. His fist clenched. My fist clenched. It was Tombstone. Sounds like this faggot thinks he's in a Hollywood movie. The only sad part is Schaefer Cox went to prison. Let me interject something here. If there was a plan, Schaefer and Zerbe would have talked about it right here because everybody in the room was supposedly associated with constitutional militia. There was not a plan, and that was what was making Bill Fulton so angry. The book goes on to write, if you ever question my integrity again, I will slit your GD throat and bleed you out at my feet, you fucking son of a bitch. I lunged at Zerby across Brian's path. Brian grabbed me, his arms around me tight, like I knew he would. I struggled. Zerby's eyes were saucers. Every muscle in my body was taut and straining to get at him. "Get back here, you fucking piece of shit," I growled as he stumbled backwards through the door. You know, this would have been a perfect time. If you're ever in this situation and someone lunges at you with a knife and threatens your throat, you are justified to pull out your holster and you put a 45 right in their head. I'm not joking. This is, if any mistake was done at Blondie's, it's that Bill Fulton didn't get a 45 in his head. That's the mistake as far as I see it. I growled as he stumbled backwards through the door into the back room. His eyes were glued to me, arms fumbling as he tried to find the door behind him. I was raw with emotion, out of control, raging. That's what people saw. That's what I wanted them to see. I wanted to erase Zerby's accusations from their minds. I wanted to scare them. I wanted to scare them. I wanted them to know that my integrity was never to be questioned again, was never to be questioned ever. My life depended on it. You know, Bill Fulton brags that he threatened the life of Schaefer Cox and Les Zerby in this book. He writes about Aaron Bennett putting a cap in Schaefer's head. And yet Scrocky told the jury that you can look at all the evidence and hear all the audios and you'll never find anything where there's death threats from Bill Fulton or Schaefer Cox. Scrocky is a damn liar. It was a kangaroo court. The government informant, Bill Fulton and Aaron Bennett, allegedly, are absolutely wicked sons of bitches. They are wicked sons of Belial to let an innocent man sit in prison separated from his children. And I pray that all of them get what's coming. And this is only part 3. We'll pick back up later when I got more time. And that's my book report for now. The last line of peaceful defense between a tyrannical government and the defendant is jury nullification. Educate yourself about jury nullification at feedya.org.